When heiress Elena defies her father's plans and falls for Jesse, the humble stable hand with a mysterious past, long-buried family secrets, and a deadly betrayal threaten to destroy everything they've built. Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. The morning sun cast a golden glow over the rolling pastures of Prescott Hollow. Eleanor Prescott stood on the wide front porch of the main house, coffee cup in hand, watching as workers moved across the property like busy ants. 3,000 acres of prime southern land had been in her family for generations, and one day it would all be hers to manage. Another beautiful day at Prescott Hollow, her father Charles said, joining her on the porch. Tall and distinguished with silver hair, Charles Prescott had the bearing of a man who knew his worth down to the penny. "It always is," Elena replied. Tucking a strand of her chestnut hair behind her ear, Charles checked his gold watch. "Don't forget the Andersons are coming to dinner tonight. John's been eager to discuss some investment opportunities with us." Elena nodded, knowing exactly what kind of opportunities her father was referring to. John Anderson was the son of one of the most influential agricultural investors in the state. Charles had been not so subtly pushing Elena toward a relationship with him for months. "I'll be ready," she said, hoping her voice didn't betray her lack of enthusiasm. As her father headed back inside, Elena's gaze drifted toward the stables. She found herself doing that more and more lately. From this distance, she could just make out a familiar figure in a worn cowboy hat. Jesse Callan had come to work at Prescott Hollow 3 years ago. Quiet and hard-working, he'd quickly become their most valuable stable hand. Elena knew she shouldn't notice the way his shoulders moved as he carried feed bags or how gentle his hands were with the horses. But she did notice, more than she cared to admit. Later that morning, Elena decided to check on Stormcloud, her favorite mare who was due to foal soon. As she approached the stables, she heard a low, soothing voice. "That's it, girl. You're doing just fine. Won't be long now." She paused at the stall door. Jesse was inside, running his hand along Stormcloud's neck. The mare, usually skittish around most people, seemed perfectly calm under his touch. "Good morning," Elena said. Jesse looked up, surprise crossing his features before he quickly recovered. He straightened, touched the brim of his hat. "Morning, Miss Prescott." "How is she doing?" Eleanor asked, stepping into the stall. "Better today. The vet said the foal should come within the week." His voice was deep and measured, with that slight drawl that wasn't quite southern but wasn't northern either. Elena had never asked where he was from. "Thank you for taking such good care of her," she said. Jesse shrugged. "Just doing my job, ma'am." But they both knew it was more than that. Jesse treated the horses like family, spending extra hours with them, knowing each one's quirks and habits. Their eyes met briefly, and Elena felt that strange flutter in her chest again. Jesse's eyes were the color of whiskey in sunlight, warm and clear. When he smiled, which wasn't often, it reached those eyes in a way that made Elena feel truly seen. "I should get back to work," he said, breaking the moment. "Mr. Reynolds wants the north paddock fence fixed today." "Of course," Elena stepped aside to let him pass. "Don't let me keep you." As he walked away, she noticed a slight limp in his gait, something he'd had since a riding accident last year. He never complained about it, not once. Later that evening, Helena sat at the grand dining table in a blue dress she didn't particularly like, making polite conversation with John Anderson, while silently counting the minutes until dinner would be over. "The property looked impressive during our drive in," John said to Charles. "You've maintained it beautifully." Charles beamed with pride. "The Prescott legacy is built on this land. Elena understands that, don't you, dear? She'll be taking over someday, keeping the tradition alive." "An admirable responsibility," John said, his gaze lingering on Elena in a way that made her want to disappear. "I've always believed that joining the right families together can create something greater than the sum of its parts." Elena took a long sip of wine. The weight of expectations felt heavier each day. This was her role, to be the dutiful daughter, to make the right match, to preserve the Prescott name. But lately she couldn't stop wondering if there was more to life than what had been mapped out for her. "You seem distracted tonight," her brother Michael said as they stood on the porch after dinner. At 32, Michael was the free spirit of the family, the one who'd rejected the path their father had chosen for him. "I'm just tired," Elena replied. Michael laughed. "Tired of John Anderson, you mean? I don't blame you. The man has the personality of dry toast." Elena smiled despite herself. "He's exactly what Dad wants for me. And what do you want?" The question hung in the air between them. Elena looked out toward the stables, now dark except for a single light. "I don't know anymore," she admitted. Michael followed her gaze. "Or maybe you do know and you're scared to admit it. What's that supposed to mean?" He shrugged. "I've seen how you look at that cowboy, Jesse, right? And how he looks at you when he thinks no one's watching." Elena felt her cheeks warm. "Don't be ridiculous. He works for us." "So? He seems like a good man, a real one, not some stuffed shirt Dad picked out from his country club directory." "It's not that simple," Elena sighed. "It never is," Michael replied. "But at some point, sis, you have to start living for yourself instead of for Prescott Hollow." The next morning brought dark clouds and the smell of rain. Elena found herself at the stables again, checking on Stormcloud. When she arrived, the mare was clearly in distress. "What's wrong?" she asked Jesse, who was already in the stall. "The foal's coming, but something's not right," he said, his voice tense. "I've called the vet, but with this storm rolling in..." As if on cue, thunder rumbled in the distance. Elena rolled up her sleeves. "Tell me what to do." Jesse looked at her in surprise. "Miss Prescott, you don't need to..." "Elena," she interrupted. "Call me Elena, and I want to help." For hours, they worked side by side as the storm grew fiercer. Outside, Jesse's hands were steady as he guided Elena, showing her how to comfort the mare. The vet arrived eventually, but by then, they'd already helped bring the foal safely into the world. "You did good," Jesse said softly as they watched the wobbly-legged colt nuzzle against its mother. "Most people in your position wouldn't have stayed." "Most people in my position don't know what they're missing," Eleanor replied. The storm outside had turned into a full-blown tempest. Rain pounded against the roof and wind howled through the cracks in the old barn. "You shouldn't try to get back to the house in this," Jesse said, looking out at the flooded path. "The supply barn has a small office. It'll be dry there until the storm passes." They made a dash for it, rain soaking them both in seconds. By the time they reached the supply barn, Eleanor was shivering, her thin blouse clinging to her skin. Jesse found an old flannel shirt hanging on a hook. "Here," he offered. "It's clean enough." Elena took it gratefully, turning away to change while Jesse busied himself lighting the small kerosene heater in the corner of the office. When she turned back, he'd removed his own wet jacket, revealing a simple grey t-shirt that did little to hide the strength in his arms. "Thank you," she said, wrapping the oversized shirt tighter around herself. It smelled like hay and sunshine, and something else uniquely Jesse. "There's some coffee in that thermos if you want," he said, nodding to a shelf. "It might still be warm." They sat in companionable silence for a while, listening to the storm rage outside. Elena found herself studying Jesse's profile, the strong jawline, the slight crinkles around his eyes that hinted at hidden smiles. "How did you end up at Prescott Hollow?" she asked suddenly. Jesse seemed surprised by the question. "I needed work. You were hiring." "That's it?" He shrugged. "I've always been good with horses, been around them my whole life." "Where is home for you?" Elena pressed, realizing how little she knew about him. "Nowhere in particular," Jesse said. "My mom died when I was young. My stepdad and I moved around a lot for work, ranch to ranch mostly." "I'm sorry about your mother," Elena said softly. "It was a long time ago." His voice was quiet. "She loved horses too. Used to tell me they could see into a person's soul, know who they really are." "Is that why you're so good with them?" A ghost of a smile crossed his face. "Maybe. Or maybe they just know I respect them." Elena pulled her knees up to her chest. "I've lived on this land my entire life, and I don't think I understand it half as well as you do." "You understand plenty," Jesse said. "I've seen you with Stormcloud. She trusts you. She trusts you more. That's different. I'm with her every day, and I'm just the owner's daughter who drops by occasionally," Elena said, a hint of bitterness in her voice. Jesse looked at her then, really looked at her. "That's not what I meant. You're more than that. To the horses, to the ranch, to... He didn't finish the sentence, but something in his eyes made Elena's heart beat faster. The small space between them seemed to shrink. To what? She whispered. Jesse's. Gaze dropped to her lips for just a moment before he looked away. It doesn't matter. I ain't the kind of man your people would ever choose for you. The words hung in the air between them, honest and painful. Elena wanted to tell him he was wrong, that it didn't matter what anyone else thought. But wasn't that exactly what had been drilled into her since childhood? The Prescott name, the Prescott legacy, the Prescott responsibility. What if I get to choose? She said, so quietly she wasn't sure he'd heard. The storm outside began to ease, rain softening to a gentle patter. Jesse stood, putting a careful distance between them. Storm's passing, he said. I should get you back to the house before your father sends out a search party. The moment had broken, but something had shifted between them. As they walked back to the main house in the aftermath of the storm, puddles reflecting the emerging sunlight, Elena felt a new kind of clarity. For the first time in years, she was questioning everything she'd accepted as her fate. And it was all because of the quiet cowboy who walked beside her, keeping a respectful distance, but who had somehow bridged the space to her heart without even trying. A week after the storm, Elena couldn't stop thinking about those hours spent with Jesse in the supply barn. Something had changed between them, something unspoken but powerful. She found herself making more trips to the stables, checking on Stormcloud and her new foal. Each time her heart beat a little faster when Jesse was there, and sank a little when he wasn't. You're spending a lot of time with the horses lately, her father remarked over breakfast one morning. Charles Prescott didn't miss much, especially when it came to his daughter. The new foal needs attention, Elena replied, focusing on buttering her toast. We have staff for that, Charles said. His tone was light, but his eyes were shrewd. Speaking of which, John Anderson called again. He's invited you to the charity gala at his father's country club next weekend. Elena put down her knife. Dad, I'm not interested in John, Charles frowned. Elena, the Andersons control half the agricultural contracts in this state. A partnership with them would secure Prescott Hollow for generations. Is that all you care about? The business? That business is your heritage, Charles said, his voice hardening. How your grandfather built this place from nothing. Your mother, God rest her soul, believed in what we've created here. And now you want to throw it away because you're not interested? Eleanor felt the familiar guilt twisting in her stomach. Her mother had died when she was just 15, and Charles had used her memory as a shield ever since. I'm not throwing anything away, she said quietly. I just want to make my own choices. Your choices affect more than just you. Charles stood up. There are 35 families who depend on this farm for their livelihood. Remember that the next time you decide to follow your heart instead of your head. He left the room, leaving Eleanor with a cold cup of coffee and a heavier heart. Later that day, she found herself walking toward the south pasture where Jesse was mending fences. She hadn't planned to go there, but her feet seemed to have a mind of their own. Jesse looked up as she approached, wiping sweat from his brow. Miss Prescott. Elena, she corrected him again. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. Elena. Just hearing him say her name sent a shiver through her that had nothing to do with the cool breeze. Need something? He asked. No, I just... Elena hesitated. What could she say? That she couldn't stop thinking about him? That she felt more alive during those few hours in the storm than she had in years? I wanted to see how the fence repairs were coming along. Jesse's eyes told her he didn't quite believe her, but he played along. Almost done here. Storm did a number on the south side. Eleanor nodded, watching his hands as he worked the wire. Strong hands calloused from years of labor, but so gentle with the horses. She wondered how they would feel against her skin. I heard John Anderson's been coming around a lot, Jesse said suddenly, his eyes fixed on his work. Elena was surprised. How did you know that? People talk, he shrugged, especially when it involves the boss's daughter and one of the richest men in the county. It's not what you think, Elena said. It's none of my business what it is, Jesse replied, his voice flat. Jesse, Elena stepped closer. The other night, what you said about not being the kind of man my family would choose, I shouldn't have said that. He still wouldn't look at her. But it was true, Elena said softly. My father has my whole life planned out. The right husband, the right connections to help the business. Love doesn't factor into the equation. Jessie finally met her eyes. And what do you want? I want... Eleanor took a deep breath. I want someone who sees me. Not Prescott Hollow, not the family name, just me. Something flickered in Jessie's eyes. Hope, maybe, or fear. He took a step toward her, then stopped as a truck horn blared in the distance. Michael's beat-up pickup truck came bouncing down the dirt road. He pulled up beside them, grinning from behind his sunglasses. There you are, sis. I've been looking all over for you. He nodded at Jessie. Callan. Mr. Prescott, Jessie replied, tipping his hat. Just Michael, please. Mr. Prescott makes me sound like my father. He turned back to Eleanor. Dad's on the warpath. The Hendersons called to cancel their breeding contract, and apparently it's somehow your fault for not charming their son at the Masons' party last month. Eleanor sighed. Of course it is. I told him to take a breath, but you know, Dad. Better come smooth things over before he fires half the staff. Michael glanced between her and Jessie, a knowing look in his eye. Unless you're busy here. No, Elena said, though everything in her wanted to stay. I'll come now. As she climbed into Michael's truck, she looked back at Jessie. He'd returned to his work, his face unreadable. So, Michael said as they drove back to the main house. You and the cowboy, huh? There's no me and the cowboy, Elena replied. But you want there to be. It wasn't a question. Elena stared out the window. It doesn't matter what I want. Of course it does, Michael said. You're 35 years old, Elena. When are you going to start living your own life? You know it's not that simple. It could be, Michael insisted. Look, I know Dad can be intimidating, but you're stronger than you think. Mom would have wanted you to be happy. The mention of their mother sent a pang through Eleanor's chest. You think she'd approve of me falling for someone who works for us? I think she'd approve of you falling for a good man who treats you with respect, Michael replied. And from what I've seen, Jessie Callan fits that description. Back at the house, Charles was pacing in his office. His face was flushed with anger. There you are, he said when Eleanor entered. Do you have any idea what's at stake here? The Hendersons have been our partners for 20 years, and now they're taking their business elsewhere. I'm sorry about the contract, Dad, but it's hardly my fault if their son was unpleasant company, Eleanor replied. Unpleasant? He's one of the most eligible bachelors in the state. Being rich doesn't make someone worth spending time with, Elena said, her patience wearing thin. Charles narrowed his eyes. This attitude of yours is getting tiresome. You have responsibilities to this family, to this land. And what about my responsibility to myself? Eleanor asked. Don't I deserve to be happy? Happiness is a luxury, Charles snapped. Security is what matters. Ask any of those workers out there if they'd rather have a job or a feeling. Eleanor thought of Jessie, who seemed to have both pride in his work and a quiet contentment she envied. I'm not going to the Anderson Gala, she said firmly. Charles stared at her. Excuse me. I said, I'm not going. And I'm not going to keep pretending to be interested in men I have nothing in common with, just because they might be good for business. A tense silence filled the room. Then Charles spoke, his voice dangerously calm. This is about that stable hand, isn't it? I've seen the way you look at him. Eleanor felt her face flush. His name is Jesse. I don't care what his name is, Charles said. He's an employee, nothing more. And if he's given you the impression that there could be anything between you two, then maybe he shouldn't be working here at all. Fear shot through Eleanor. You wouldn't. Try me, Charles challenged. This family has worked too hard for two, long to throw everything away on some foolish infatuation. Eleanor felt tears pricking at her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. It's not an infatuation. Then what is it? Charles demanded. I don't know yet, Eleanor admitted, but I'd like the chance to find out without you threatening to fire him. Charles sat down heavily in his leather chair. For a moment he looked older than his 65 years. Elena, he said, his voice softening, I'm trying to protect you. Men like him, they see dollar signs when they look at women like you. That's not true, Elena said. Jesse's not like that. They never seem like that at first, Charles replied. Your mother thought the same thing once. Elena stared at him. What are you talking about? Charles waved a hand dismissively. It doesn't matter. Now, ancient history. No, Elena pressed. You can't just drop something like that and then dismiss it. What happened with Mom? Charles was silent for a long moment. Before I met your mother, she was involved with a ranch hand on her father's property. Young, handsome, full of dreams, but no means to achieve them. When her father found out, he fired the man on the spot. And, Eleanor prompted when he paused, and 3 months later that same man was arrested for stealing from another ranch where he'd found work. Your grandfather saved your mother from making a terrible mistake. Charles leaned forward. Just as I'm trying to save you. Elena shook her head. Jesse isn't a thief. Maybe not, Charles conceded. But the point remains. You're from different worlds. Eventually that catches up to you. The conversation left Elena feeling drained. She wandered out to the garden, seeking solace among her mother's beloved roses. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. Rough day? Michael appeared beside her, offering a glass of sweet tea. Elena took it gratefully. Dad told me about Mom and some ranch hand before she met him. Michael raised an eyebrow. Really? That's a first. You knew? I found some old letters in the attic a few years ago, Michael admitted. Mum kept them along with a photo. The guy looked happy, genuine. Not at all like the criminal Dad probably painted him as. Eleanor sipped her tea. Dad says they come from different worlds, that it never would have worked. Maybe, Michael shrugged. Or maybe Granddad was just as controlling as Dad is. We'll never know. They sat in companionable silence as darkness fell over Prescott Hollow. In the distance, Elena could see the lights of the worker cabins where Jesse lived. What are you going to do? Michael asked finally. I don't know, Elena replied honestly. I can't risk Dad firing Jesse. He loves his job here. And he loves you, Michael said simply. Elena looked at her brother in surprise. He's never said that. He doesn't have to. It's written all over his face whenever you're around. Michael stood up. Look, whatever you decide, I've got your back. Just don't sacrifice your own happiness to keep the peace. It's not worth it. After Michael left, Eleanor remained in the garden, thinking about her father's story and Jesse's warm eyes. The next day was Saturday, her day to ride Stormcloud's sister, Midnight Sky, across the back acres. Jesse always prepared the horse for her. Maybe then, away from prying eyes and family pressure, she could find the courage to speak what was in her heart. Morning came with a heavy mist hanging over the fields. Elena dressed in her riding clothes and headed to the stables. Her pulse quickened when she saw Jesse leading Midnight Sky out, the mare already saddled and ready. Good morning, she said. Morning, he replied, his voice guarded. She's all set for you. Thank you, Elena said, taking the reins. Their fingers brushed and she felt that familiar spark. Would you like to ride with me today? Jesse looked surprised. I have work to do. It can wait, Elena said, surprised by her own boldness. Please, Jesse, I'd like the company. Something in her voice must have convinced him. He nodded slowly. Let me saddle Thunder, he said. 10 minutes later, they were riding side by side through the misty fields. The world seemed shrouded, private, as if they were the only two people for miles. It's beautiful out here, Elena said. It is, Jesse agreed. You're lucky to call this place home. Sometimes it feels more like a cage, Elena admitted. Jesse looked at her. A cage most people would give anything to be trapped in. I know how fortunate I am, Elena said. But wealth doesn't guarantee happiness. Neither does poverty, Jesse replied with a hint of wry humor. They reached the small lake at the property's edge and dismounted, letting the horses drink. Standing by the water's edge, Eleanor gathered her courage. My father threatened to fire. You, she said bluntly. Jesse's expression didn't change. Because of us. Is there an us? Elena asked, her heart in her throat. Jesse stepped closer. There could be. If you wanted it. If you were sure. That's just it, Elena said. I am sure about how I feel when I'm with you. But I'm scared, Jesse. Scared of what it might cost you, cost us both. I can find another job, Jesse said quietly. But there's only one you. The sincerity in his voice made Elena's heart swell. It's not just the job. It's this place, Prescott Hollow. It's part of you now, too. I see how you care for it, for the animals. I care for you more, Jesse said, his eyes never leaving hers. And there it was, the simple truth that changed everything. In that moment, standing by the lake in the morning mist, Elena Prescott made her choice. Then we'll figure it out, she said. Together. Jesse reached for her hand, his touch sending warmth through her entire body. They stood like that, fingers intertwined, neither speaking, both understanding that they had just crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. What they didn't see was the figure watching from the ridge above, binoculars trained on their clasped hands, a cell phone already dialing Charles Prescott's number. Elena returned from her ride with Jesse feeling lighter than she had in years. For the first time, she had acknowledged her feelings aloud, and Jesse had done the same. Though they hadn't kissed, the connection between them felt more intimate than anything she'd experienced before. Her happiness was short-lived. As she approached the stables to return Midnight Sky, she saw her father's black truck parked outside. Charles Prescott was waiting, his face like thunder. "Dad," Elena said, dismounting quickly, "what are you doing here?" Charles ignored her question, his gaze fixed on Jesse, who had just arrived on Thunder. "Mr. Callan, in my office now." "Dad, whatever this is about," Elena began. "This doesn't concern you," Charles cut her off. "If it's about Jesse, it absolutely concerns me," Elena shot back. Jesse dismounted, his face calm despite the tension. "It's all right, Elena." He handed the reins to another stable hand who had appeared, looking nervous. "I'll take care of the horses, Tom." Charles turned to Elena. "You should go back to the house." "I'm coming with you," Elena insisted. The drive to the main house was silent and tense. When they arrived, Charles led them into his wood-paneled office and closed the door. "I received an interesting phone call this morning," he said, leaning against his desk. "From Douglas Whitaker." Eleanor's stomach dropped. Douglas was the son of one of their neighbors, a man who had been trying to buy pieces of Prescott land for years. He was also someone who held a grudge against Elena for turning him down at a dance 5 years ago. "That little weasel," she muttered. "He saw the two of you by the lake," Charles continued, holding hands looking very familiar. Jesse stood tall, his hat in his hands. "Sir, I have nothing but respect for your daughter." "Respect?" Charles laughed without humor. "Is that what you call sneaking around behind my back, taking advantage of my daughter's kind nature?" "That's not what's happening," Elena interjected. "And we weren't sneaking around." "Then what would you call it?" Charles demanded. Elena took a deep breath. Two people getting to know each other. "He works for us, Elena," Charles said, as if she might have forgotten. "He's employed to take care of the horses, not my daughter." "I understand how this looks," Jesse said, his voice steady. "And if you want my resignation, you have it. But don't blame Elena. She didn't do anything wrong." "No," Elena said firmly. "You're not resigning." "Dad, this is ridiculous. I'm a grown woman, not some teenager you can order around. I decide who I spend time with." Charles's face reddened. "As long as you live under my roof, then maybe I shouldn't live under your roof anymore," Elena interrupted, surprising herself with the words. A heavy silence fell over the room. Charles stared at his daughter as if seeing her for the first time. "You'd choose this cowboy over your family, over Prescott Hollow?" "I'm not choosing anyone over anyone," Elena said. "I'm just asking for the freedom to follow my heart without ultimatums." Charles turned to Jesse. "And you? Are you prepared to be responsible for tearing this family apart, for taking Elena away from everything she's ever known?" Jesse looked at Charles steadily. "I would never ask Elena to choose between me and her. Family, that's not love, that's control." The simple words hung in the air. Charles's expression flickered. Was it surprise, recognition? "Sir," Jesse continued, "I grew up with nothing. No name, no land, no legacy, but my stepfather taught me one thing worth having: integrity. I've worked hard every day of my life, and I've never taken what wasn't freely given." He glanced at Elena, his eyes softening. "Your daughter is the most remarkable woman I've ever known, not because of her name or this land, but because of who she is. Her kindness, her strength, her heart. If you think I'm not good enough for her, you're right. No man could be. But I would spend every day trying to be worthy of her if she'd let me." Elena felt tears well in her eyes. No one had ever spoken about her that way, as a person, not as an heiress or a duty. Charles's face was unreadable. Finally, he spoke. "Mr. Callan, you're dismissed for the day. I need to speak with my daughter alone." Jessie nodded. At the door, he paused and looked back at Eleanor. The message in his eyes was clear. Whatever happens, I'm here. When the door closed behind him, Eleanor faced her father. That was cruel and unnecessary. Charles sank into his chair, suddenly looking every one of his 65 years. "Sit down, Elena." Something in his tone made her comply. Charles opened a drawer and pulled out an old worn envelope. "I've never shown this to anyone," he said quietly. "Not even your mother knew I kept it." He handed the envelope to Elena. Inside was a faded photograph of a young woman who looked remarkably like Elena, standing beside a young man in worn jeans and a work shirt. They were smiling, their arms around each other. "Mom?" Elena whispered. Charles nodded. "And James Harmon, the ranch hand I told you about." Eleanor studied the photo. The joy on her mother's face was unmistakable. They looked happy. They were, Charles admitted, or at least Catherine thought they were. "What really happened?" Elena asked. "You said he was arrested for theft." Charles sighed. "He was. But there was more to the story. Catherine's father, your grandfather, didn't approve of James, not just because he was poor, but because he saw what Catherine couldn't, that James was deeply in debt from gambling." He took the photo back, looking at it with a mixture of sadness and old anger. "When your grandfather fired him, James became desperate. He stole some valuable equipment from the Hendersons' ranch, got caught, went to jail, and Mom never knew. Your grandfather told her it was for the best. That James had shown his true colors." Charles put the photo away. "6 months later, I met Catherine at a benefit dinner. The rest is history." Eleanor tried to absorb this information. "Why are you telling me this now?" "Because history has a way of repeating itself," Charles said. "And because I don't want you to make the same mistake your mother narrowly avoided." "Jesse isn't James," Eleanor said firmly. "You've known him for 3 years. Has he ever given you reason to doubt his character?" Charles was silent. "Has he?" Eleanor pressed. "No," Charles admitted reluctantly. "He's been a model employee. The horses respond to him better than anyone we've had." "Then why can't you give him a chance? Give us a chance?" Charles ran a hand over his face. "Because I'm afraid, Elena, afraid of what might happen to you, to this place, if things go wrong. You're my daughter. I don't want to see you hurt." For the first time, Elena saw past her father's controlling exterior to the fear beneath. She reached across the desk and took his hand. "Dad, I love you. I love Prescott Hollow. But I need to live my own life, make my own choices, even my own mistakes. You can't protect me forever." Charles squeezed her hand. "I know, but it's hard to let go." They sat in silence for a moment. Then Charles straightened, his business face returning. "I'm not saying I approve, but I won't interfere for now. Mr. Callan keeps his job, and you do what you feel you must." It wasn't wholehearted acceptance, but it was a start. Elena smiled. "Thank you, Dad." After leaving her father's office, Elena immediately went looking for Jesse. She found him in the far paddock, watching the yearlings. "Run, Jesse," she called. He turned, and the relief on his face when he saw her was palpable. "You okay?" "Better than okay," she said, joining him at the fence. "My father won't interfere. He's not thrilled, but he's agreed to give us space." Jesse's eyebrows rose in surprise. "I thought for sure I'd be packing my bags tonight." "So did I," Elena admitted. "But he actually opened up to me, told me about my mother and a ranch hand she once loved." "And that changed his mind?" "Not entirely," Elena smiled, "but it reminded him that people are more than their circumstances. That includes you." Jesse reached for her hand, hesitated, then took it when she nodded. "So what happens now?" "Now," Helena said, "we get to know each other properly without hiding." And for the first time since they'd met, Jesse Callan smiled fully, a warm, genuine smile that transformed his face and made Elena's heart skip a beat. "I'd like that," he said softly. In the weeks that followed, Elena and Jesse grew closer. They rode together on Sundays, took picnic lunches by the lake, and talked for hours about their lives, their dreams, their fears. Elena learned that Jesse had lived in 7 different states, that he could name every constellation in the night sky, and that he dreamed of one day having his own small horse breeding operation. Jesse learned that Elena had studied art in college, before duty called her home, that she could still recite entire passages from books she'd loved as a child, and that despite her privileged upbringing, she understood hard work and sacrifice. Word spread quickly around Prescott Hollow. Some of the workers exchanged knowing smiles when they saw Elena and Jesse together. Others, particularly those closest to Charles, kept their distance, clearly disapproving. Michael, of course, was delighted. "I've never seen you this happy," he told Elena one evening as they sat on the porch. "It looks good on you." "I am happy," Elena admitted. "Jesse is... he's different from anyone I've ever known." "Different how?" Michael asked. Elena considered the question. "He's real. There's no pretense with him, no agenda. He says what he means and means what he says." "A rare quality these days," Michael agreed, "especially in our circles. Not everyone was as supportive." When Elena took Jesse as her date to the annual Founders' Day celebration in town, the whispers were impossible to ignore. The Prescott heiress and the stable hand, it was the scandal of the season. John Anderson, who had been pursuing Elena for months, confronted her at the punch bowl. "So the rumors are true," he said, eyeing Jesse, who was talking to Michael across the room. "You're slumming it with the help." Elena felt her temper flare. "I'd watch your words, John." "Why? Everyone's thinking it." He leaned closer. "Your father must be beside himself. First your brother throws away his birthright, and now you're throwing yourself away on some drifter." "Jesse is worth 10 of you," Elena said coldly. "And my father respects my choices, even if he doesn't always agree with them. Can you say the same about yours?" It was a low blow. John's controlling father was well known in their circles, but Eleanor was tired of the judgment, the whispers, the assumptions that someone like Jesse couldn't possibly be good enough. She walked away from John and straight to Jesse, taking his hand publicly. A statement. "This is my choice. This is who I choose." That night, under a blanket of stars, Jesse kissed her for the first time. It was gentle and tentative at first, then deepened into something that felt like coming home and setting off on an adventure all at once. "I've wanted to do that since the day in the storm," he confessed, his forehead resting against hers. "Why didn't you?" Elena asked. "Because I needed to be sure you were sure," he said simply. "That this wasn't just rebellion or curiosity." Elena touched his face. "It's not. It's the most certain I've ever been about anything." Their happiness, however, was about to be challenged in ways neither could have anticipated. The next morning, Eleanor was going over the books in the farm office when Tom, the stable hand, burst in. His face was pale. "Miss Prescott, you need to..." "Come quick, it's storm cloud, something's wrong." Elena raced to the stables. The mare was lying in her stall, breathing heavily, her eyes wild with pain. Jesse was already there, his face grim. "What happened?" Elena asked, kneeling beside the horse. "Don't know," Jesse said. "She was fine earlier. Then Tom found her like this." The vet arrived 20 minutes later, but it was too late. Storm Cloud had been poisoned, whether accidentally or deliberately, no one could say. Helena wept as they covered the mare's body, remembering how she and Jesse had helped bring her foal into the world during the storm. "Who would do this?" she asked through her tears. Jesse shook his head. "Could have been an accident. She might have eaten something in the pasture." But Elena saw the doubt in his eyes. A sick feeling settled in her stomach. Stormcloud had been a prime breeding mare, worth a small fortune. Charles arrived as they were removing the body. His face was ashen. "How did this happen?" "We don't know yet," Eleanor said, wiping her tears. Charles turned to Jesse. "You were responsible for her care." "Dad," Eleanor warned, "this isn't Jesse's fault, isn't it?" Charles's voice hardened. "Since you two started your relationship, he's been distracted, less focused on his actual job." "That's not true," Jesse said quietly. "I would never neglect the horses, sir. You know that." Charles looked unconvinced. "We'll see what the vets report." "Says?" The atmosphere at Prescott Hollow turned tense. Though the vet's report was inconclusive, rumors began to circulate. Some suggested Jesse had been careless. Others whispered darker theories that someone wanted to hurt the Prescotts, or specifically, to drive a wedge between Eleanor and Jesse. 1. Evening, as they walked through the orchard, Jesse brought up what neither had wanted to discuss. "People are talking," he said, "saying I'm bad luck for Prescott Hollow." "Since when do you care what people say?" Elena asked. "Since it started affecting you," Jesse replied. "Your father barely speaks to you now. The board members give you the cold shoulder, and I saw how the Millers treated you at church on Sunday." Elena stopped walking. "Are you having second thoughts about us?" "Never," Jesse said firmly, "but I hate seeing what this is costing you." "None of that matters to me," Elena said. "Only you matter." Jesse took her hands. "When I was 15, my stepdad told me something I never forgot. He said, 'Love should add to your life, not take away from it.' I'm afraid I'm taking more than I'm giving, Elena." "That's not true," Elena insisted. "You've given me more than you know, freedom, courage, joy." She stepped closer, wrapping her arms around him. "Whatever we're facing, we face it together." Jesse held her tight, but she could feel the tension in his body, the worry that wouldn't quite let go. The next morning, Elena came down to breakfast to find her father and Michael in serious conversation. They stopped abruptly when she entered. "What's going on?" she asked. Michael looked uncomfortable. Charles cleared his throat. "We've had some troubling news. The bank called. There's been an unusual withdrawal from one of our business accounts." "Unusual? How?" Elena asked. $10,000, Charles said. "Transferred electronically 2 days ago. Neither Michael nor I authorized it." "Maybe it's a mistake," Elena suggested. "Or a technical glitch." "The bank says someone used my access codes," Charles said grimly, "which only 3 people have, you, me, and Michael." Elena felt cold. "You can't possibly think I took the money." "Of course not," Charles said, "but I wonder if you shared your computer with anyone recently." The implication was clear. Elena stared at her father in disbelief. "If you're suggesting Jesse had anything to do with this—" "I'm not suggesting anything," Charles interrupted. "I'm asking a simple question. Jesse would never steal from us," Elena said firmly. "He doesn't even know how to access our banking system." "Are you sure about that?" Charles pressed. "You've been spending a lot of time together. Perhaps you left your laptop open or—" "Stop it," Elena snapped. "Just stop. I know what you're doing, Dad. You're looking for any excuse to discredit Jesse, to prove you were right about him all along." "I'm trying to protect this family and this business," Charles shot back. "Someone stole from us, Elena. If it wasn't you and it wasn't Michael or me, then who?" Elena had no answer, but her heart refused to believe it could be Jesse. Later that day, she found him in the tack room, polishing saddles. His face lit up when he saw her, then dimmed as he read her expression. "What's wrong?" he asked. She told him about the missing money, watching his face carefully. His shock seemed genuine. "Your father thinks I took it," he said. "It wasn't a question. He's looking for someone to blame," Elena said. "But I know it wasn't you." Jesse put down the saddle soap. "How can you be so sure?" "Because I know you," Elena said simply. "You're not a thief." Jesse's eyes held hers. "Thank you for believing in me. Not everyone would. Not everyone knows you like I do," Elena replied. But as she walked back to the house, a tiny seed of doubt began to grow, planted by her father's words and fertilized by the memory of her mother's ranch hand. What if she was wrong about Jesse? What if love had blinded her to the truth? She pushed the thought away. No, Jesse was good and honest and true. Someone else was behind this, someone who wanted to destroy what they had found together. What Elena didn't know was that at that very moment, a stranger was checking into the small motel on the edge of town. A woman in her 60s with faded beauty and tired eyes, carrying a worn leather bag and a yellowed envelope containing a birth certificate and a deed to land that had once been part of Prescott Hollow. The woman who had abandoned her son 35 years ago had returned, and she was about to upend everyone's lives. The morning sun cast long shadows across Prescott Hollow as Elena stood on the porch, coffee in hand, watching Jesse work with the new yearlings in the distant corral. Despite the troubles of the past, week, Stormcloud's death, and the missing money, She felt a strange peace just seeing him there, patient and steady as always. "He's good with them," Michael said, joining her on the porch. "Better than anyone we've ever had." "I know," Eleanor replied softly. Michael studied his sister's face. "The board meeting is this afternoon. Dad's going to bring up the missing funds." Eleanor's grip tightened on her mug. "Has he found anything, any proof of who took it?" "No," Michael admitted. "But he's convinced Jesse is involved somehow." "Based on what?" Elena demanded. "A prejudice against anyone who doesn't come from money?" Michael sighed. "Elena, I like Jesse, I really do, but you have to admit the timing is suspicious. Stormcloud dies, money goes missing, all after you two start seeing each other openly." "You sound like Dad," Elena said, hurt evident in her voice. "I'm just asking you to be careful," Michael said gently. "To keep your eyes open." Elena set her mug down. "My eyes are open, and what I see is a good man being blamed without evidence because of where he comes from." As she walked toward the stables, Eleanor fought against the doubt that had been gnawing at her. She trusted Jesse, with her heart, with her horses, with everything, but her father's suspicions and now Michael's caution were harder to ignore than she wanted to admit. Jesse looked up as she approached, that rare smile warming his face. "Morning," he said, tipping his hat. "Morning," Elena replied, leaning against the fence. "They're looking good." "They're smart," Jesse said, nodding at the yearlings. "Quick learners." For a moment they stood in comfortable silence. Then Jesse spoke again. "Your father called me into his office this morning." Elena's heart sank. "What did he want?" "To tell me I'm not welcome at the board meeting." Jesse's voice was carefully neutral. "Said it's family business only." Elena frowned. "He's never cared. Before, who sits in on those meetings?" "He does now." Jesse turned to face her fully. "Elena, I think it might be best if I step back for a while. Give things a chance to calm down." "No," Elena said firmly. "That's exactly what he wants, for us to break under the pressure. I'm not talking about us," Jesse clarified, "just about me being less visible around the main house, maybe take on more of the work in the back pastures for a while." Eleanor hated the idea, but she could see the logic in it. "Okay, but just until we figure out what's really going on with the missing money." Jesse nodded, his eyes soft as they held hers. "Whatever's happening, we'll get through it." She wanted to believe him, needed to believe him. That afternoon, Eleanor sat at the long mahogany table in the Prescott Hollow conference room. The quarterly board meeting was normally a routine affair. Reports on breeding programs, crop yields, financial projections. Today, the tension in the room was palpable. Charles stood at the head of the table, his face grave. "Before we begin with regular business, there's a security matter we need to address. $10,000 was transferred from our operations account 3 days ago using access codes that only 3 people possess." The board members, mostly longtime family friends and business associates, exchanged concerned glances. "We've initiated an investigation," Charles continued. "The bank is tracing the transfer, and we've hired a private security consultant to review our systems." "Any leads?" asked Howard Jameson, their oldest board member. Charles's eyes flickered to Elena before he answered. "Nothing concrete yet, but we have reason to believe it may be an inside job." The implication hung heavy in the air. Elena felt her face flush with anger. Her father was all but accusing Jesse publicly without saying his name. "Dad," she said, keeping her voice steady, "maybe we should wait for actual evidence before making insinuations." "I'm merely stating facts, Eleanor," Charles replied. "The timing is concerning given recent changes at Prescott Hollow." Several board members glanced uncomfortably at Elena. Everyone knew about her relationship with Jesse. The whispers and rumors had reached every corner of the county. "If you have something to say it directly," Elena challenged. "Don't hide behind vague accusations." An uncomfortable silence fell over the room. Michael cleared his throat. "Let's focus on the investigation," he suggested. "Dad, what's the timeline for the security review?" The meeting continued, but Elena barely heard the rest of it. Her mind was racing, torn between defending Jesse and a tiny, persistent doubt she couldn't quite silence. As the board members filed out, Charles asked Elena to stay behind. When they were alone, he sat down heavily in his chair. "I didn't want to do this," he said, sliding a folder across the table. "But you've left me. No choice." Elena opened the folder. Inside was a background check on Jesse along with several old newspaper clippings. "What is this?" she asked. "The truth about your cowboy," Charles said. "Jesse Callan has moved from ranch to ranch every few years, and at each stop there have been incidents, small thefts, unexplained accidents, valuable animals dying mysteriously." Elena's hands trembled as she looked through the papers. "This doesn't prove anything." "Read the report from the Double R Ranch in Wyoming," Charles said. 3 years ago, just before he came here, they lost a prize stallion, poisoned, just like Stormcloud." Elena felt sick. "Did they prove it was him?" "They couldn't prove it," Charles admitted. "But the pattern is clear, Elena. Wherever Jesse Callan goes, trouble follows." She pushed the folder away. "I don't believe it. There has to be another explanation." "I hope for your sake there is," Charles said, his voice softening. "But as your father, and as the head of this family, I had to show you what I found." Helena left the conference room feeling like the ground beneath her feet had shifted. She needed to talk to Jesse, to hear his side. But a small voice inside her whispered, "What if he lies? What if you've been wrong about him all along?" As she walked back to the house, Elena was so lost in thought she almost collided with Martha, their housekeeper of 20 years. "Oh, I'm sorry, Martha," she said. "It's all right, dear." Martha peered at her face. "Are you okay? You look pale." Elena managed a weak smile. "Just a difficult board meeting." Martha nodded sympathetically. "There's a woman at the gate asking for you. Says it's important." "Did she give a name?" "Evelyn Harmon," Martha replied. "I told the security to let her wait in the garden." The name didn't ring any bells for Elena. "Thank you, Martha. I'll go see what she wants." In the garden, a woman in her 60s sat on the stone bench by the roses. She was thin, with silver-streaked dark hair and a face that had once been beautiful before time, and hardship had etched deep lines into it. When she saw Elena, she stood, twisting a worn purse in her hands. "Miss Prescott?" the woman asked. Are you for seeing me, Mrs. Harmon?" Elena shook her hand. "How can I help you?" The woman's eyes, a familiar shade of whiskey brown, studied Elena's face. "It's about Jesse Callan. He works here, I believe." Elena's guard went up immediately. "Yes, he does. Are you a relative?" "I'm his mother," Evelyn said quietly. The simple statement hit Elena like a physical blow. His mother? But he said his mother died when he was young. "He believes that," Evelyn nodded. "His stepfather thought it would be easier that way." Elena stared at the woman, seeing now the resemblance, the same eyes, the same strong jawline. "Why are you here now, after all these years?" Evelyn took a deep breath. "I've been trying to find him for a long time. When I finally tracked him down, I learned he was here at Prescott Hollow. It seemed fitting." "Fitting," Elena repeated. "Why?" "Because I used to work here," Evelyn said. "A long time ago, before Jesse was born." Something clicked in Elena's mind. "Harmon, you said your name is Harmon?" The woman nodded. "Yes, Evelyn Harmon. James Harmon," Elena said slowly. "The ranch hand who was in love with my mother." Evelyn's eyes widened in surprise. "You know about James?" "My father told me the story recently," Elena said. "He said James was arrested for theft after my grandfather fired him." A flash of pain crossed Evelyn's face. "That's the story everyone believes." "Are you saying it's not true?" Elena asked. "James did go to jail," Evelyn admitted, "but not for theft. Your grandfather framed him, planted stolen equipment in his truck. James never stood a chance against the Prescott name." Eleanor felt dizzy. "Why would my grandfather do that?" "To keep Catherine, your mother, away from him," Evelyn said simply. "Your grandfather couldn't bear the thought of his daughter marrying a ranch hand with no prospects." Helena sank onto the bench, trying to make sense of this revelation. "Were you and James—" "We married after he got out of prison," Evelyn confirmed. "I was the prison nurse. We fell in love, had Jesse. James raised him as his own, gave him his values, his work ethic. When James died 10 years ago, I started looking for answers about his past. She pulled an envelope from her purse. I found this among his things. He never showed it to me while he was alive. Elena took the envelope with shaking hands. Inside was a yellow deed to a small parcel of land, 50 acres on what was now the northwest corner of Prescott Hollow. I don't understand, Elena said. This land has been part of Prescott Hollow for decades. It was a wedding gift, Evelyn explained, from your mother to James before everything fell apart. A place where they planned to build a life together. Elena stared at the deed. Did my father know about this? I doubt it, Evelyn said. Catherine kept it secret, knowing her father would never approve. When James was arrested, the deed was never registered. Your grandfather simply absorbed the land back into Prescott Hollow. And now you want it back, Elena guessed. Is that why you're here? Evelyn shook her head. I'm dying, Miss Prescott. Cancer. The doctors give me 6 months, maybe less. I don't care about the land. I care about my son knowing the truth about his father, that he was a good man who was wronged by the Prescotts. Elena felt her world tilting on its axis. If what Evelyn said was true, her family had destroyed James Harmon's life, had separated Jesse from his birth mother, had built part of their fortune on a lie. Jesse doesn't know any of this, she asked. No, Evelyn confirmed. He believes I abandoned him, that I'm long dead. James thought it was kinder than the truth. Eleanor stood up, her mind racing. Mrs. Harmon, Evelyn, this is a lot to take in. I need to think. I understand, Evelyn said gently. I'm staying at the Pine Motel in town, room 12. When you're ready to talk more, I'll be there. After Evelyn left, Eleanor sat in the garden, the old deed clutched in her hand. How could she tell Jesse about this? How could she not tell him? And what did it mean for them, for her family, for Prescott Hollow? But there was something else nagging, at her. The timing of Evelyn's arrival, right when Jesse was under suspicion for theft and possibly sabotage. Was it mere coincidence, or something more? The sun was setting when Elena finally returned to the house. She found Michael in the library, going through financial records. You okay? He asked, noticing her troubled expression. You look like you've seen a ghost. Something like that, Elena replied. She told him about Evelyn Harmon, about James, and their mother about the land deed. Michael listened without interrupting, his face growing more serious by the minute. When she finished, he let out a long breath. That's quite a bombshell. Do you think it's true, Eleanor asked, about grandfather framing James? I wouldn't put it past him, Michael said grimly. But the timing is suspicious. This woman shows up right when Jesse's under scrutiny, with a story that paints our family as the villains, and potentially gives him claim to Prescott land. Eleanor hadn't thought of it that way. You think it's some kind of con? I think we need to be careful, Michael said. Get the deed authenticated. Look into this woman's background before you tell Jesse anything. Eleanor nodded slowly. You're right, if it's true, Jesse deserves to know. But if it's some kind of scheme, I'll make some calls, Michael promised. In the meantime, maybe keep some distance from Jesse just until we know more. That night, Eleanor tossed and turned, unable to sleep. Just a week ago, her biggest worry had been her father's disapproval of her relationship. Now everything was falling apart. Stormcloud dead, money missing, Jesse under suspicion, and a woman claiming to be his mother appearing with a story. That could change everything. When dawn broke, Elena made a decision. She needed to trust her heart, and her heart still believed in Jesse. She found him in the stables, already at work, despite the early hour. When he saw her, his face lit up, then shadowed with concern. You look like you didn't sleep, he said. I need to talk to you, Elena said. Somewhere private. They walked to the small grove of trees behind the stables. When they were alone, Elena turned to face him. I need to ask you something, she said. And I need you to tell me the truth. Jesse's eyes were steady. Always. Did you take the money? From the account? No, he said without hesitation. I would never steal from you or your family. Do you know anything about what happened to Stormcloud? No, Jesse's voice was firm. I loved that horse. I would have given my life to save her. Elena searched his face and saw nothing but honesty there. One more question. Your mother, you said she died when you were young. Are you sure? Surprise flashed across Jessie's features. Of course I'm sure. My stepdad told me she died when I was 3. Why are you asking me this? Elena took a deep breath. Because a woman came to see me yesterday. She says she's your mother, Jessie. And she has a story about your father and my mother that changes everything. She told him everything. About Evelyn, about James and Catherine, about the framing, the imprisonment, the deed to land that should have been his father's. Jessie listened in stunned silence, his face paling. When she finished, he turned away, bracing one hand against a tree trunk. It can't be true, he said quietly. What if it is? Elena asked. What if your father was wronged by my grandfather? What if your mother is alive and dying and wants to see you before it's too late? Jessie looked at her, his eyes haunted. If it's true, then I've been working for the family that destroyed my father's life, and falling in love with the granddaughter of the man who framed him. The words hung between them. It was the first time Jessie had spoken openly of love. Does that change how you feel about me? Elena asked, her voice small. Jessie stepped closer, taking her hands in his. No. Whatever happened between our families, it wasn't your doing. It wasn't mine. Relief washed over Elena. Michael's checking into Evelyn's story, the deed. If it's real, if she's really your mother, then I need to see her, Jessie said. Hear it from her directly. I'll take you, Elena offered. She's staying at the Pine Motel in town. As they were about to leave, Tom came running up to them. Miss Prescott, your father's looking for you, says it's urgent. Elena sighed. Tell him I'll be there soon. How he said right away, Tom insisted. They found something about the missing money. Eleanor and Jessie exchanged glances. You go, Jessie said. I'll wait. In her father's office, Eleanor found Charles and Michael with a stranger in a suit. Eleanor, this is Mr. Parker from Bank Security, Charles said. He's traced the missing funds. Where did they go? Elena asked. To an account in Wyoming, Mr. Parker said. Opened 3 years ago, around the time Mr. Callan came to work here. Elena felt sick. That doesn't mean there's more, Charles interrupted. Show her, Michael. Michael pushed a file folder across the desk reluctantly. Inside were printouts of emails between someone using the name JC and a woman named Evelyn. We found these when we did a search of the staff computers, Michael explained. They're from the one in the stable office. Eleanor scanned the emails, her heart sinking. They discussed Prescott Hollow, the layout, security details, even mentioned gaining Eleanor's trust. The last email, dated just 2 weeks ago, said, almost there, just need access to the accounts. E is completely trusting. It's a con, Charles said bluntly. This Evelyn woman and Jessie have been planning this for years. Get close to you. Get access to our money. Claim some connection to this land. Classic long con. Elena shook her head. No, there has to be another explanation. The emails don't lie, Elena, Charles said. I'm sorry. I know you had feelings for him. Where is Jessie now? Michael asked. He was waiting for me by the stables. Eleanor said numbly. We were going to go see Evelyn together. I'll send security. Charles started to reach for the phone. No, Eleanor stood up. Let me talk to him first. If what you're saying is true, I deserve to hear it from him. Before either man could stop her, Elena was out the door. She ran back to the stables, her mind racing. The emails, the money transfer, Evelyn's convenient appearance. It all painted a damning picture. But she remembered the look in Jessie's eyes when she'd told him about his mother, the genuine shock and pain there. Could he really have faked that? Jessie wasn't where she'd left him. Tom said he'd gone to check on the new foal. Eleanor headed for the birthing stall, her heart pounding. She found him there, gently stroking the foal's neck. When he saw her, his smile faded. What's wrong? He asked. They found where the money went, Elena said, watching his face carefully. To an account in Wyoming, in your name. Jessie's expression didn't change. No guilt, no panic, just confusion. I don't have an account in Wyoming. They also found emails, Elena continued, between you and Evelyn, planning to con me to get access to Prescott money. Now Jessie looked stunned. What? Elena, I've never emailed anyone named Evelyn in my life. I don't know what you're talking about. He stepped toward her, but Elena backed away. The emails came from the stable office computer. They were signed JC. I barely use that computer, Jessie protested, and when I do, it's for inventory and breeding records, that's it. Then how do you explain the money? The emails? Elena demanded, tears threatening. I can't, Jessie admitted. But Elena, you know me, look at me. Do you really believe I could do this to you? That everything between us has been a lie. Elena wanted to believe him. Every part of her heart screamed that he was innocent. But the evidence... I don't know what to believe anymore, she whispered. Jessie's face fell. The hurt in his eyes was unbearable to see. I thought you were different, he said quietly. I thought you saw me, really saw me. But when it comes down to it, I'm still just the hired help who couldn't possibly be trusted. That's not fair, Elena said. What am I supposed to think when everything points to you being involved? You're supposed to trust your heart, Jessie said, like I trusted mine with you. He walked past her, his shoulders straight despite the weight she could see crushing him. At the door he paused. For what it's worth, I never lied to you, not once. I love you, Elena Prescott, even now. And then he was gone. Elena sank onto a hay bale, tears streaming down her face. She had just made the biggest mistake of her life. She was sure of it. Despite the evidence, despite the emails and the money, her heart knew Jessie was innocent, which meant someone was framing him. But who and why? She thought of Evelyn's story, of her grandfather framing James Harmon all those years ago, history repeating itself. But who would want to frame Jessie now? A memory stirred. The night of the Founders' Day celebration, John Anderson's bitter words. Your father must be beside himself. First your brother throws away his birthright, and now you're throwing yourself away on some drifter. John Anderson, whose family had been trying to buy into Prescott Hollow for years, who had pursued Elena relentlessly until she chose Jessie instead. She stood up, suddenly certain. She needed to see Evelyn Harmon again, to find out if her story was true or part of an elaborate scheme. And she needed to find Jessie before he left Prescott Hollow forever. At the Pine Motel, the manager told her Evelyn had checked out that morning. Left in a hurry, he added. Had a young man with her. Tall fellow. Cowboy hat. Jessie. He'd gone to Evelyn after all. Elena drove back to Prescott Hollow, her mind racing. She found Michael in the barn, going through the stable office computer. Jessie's gone, she said. With Evelyn. Michael looked grim. I was afraid of that. Dad's called the police. They'll be looking for them. I don't think Jessie's guilty, Eleanor said. I think he's being set up, and I think John Anderson might be behind it. Michael raised an eyebrow. That's a serious accusation. Think about it, Eleanor insisted. John was furious when I chose Jessie over him. The Andersons have wanted a piece of Prescott Hollow for years. What better way than to discredit Jessie, break my heart, and swoop in to save me? It's possible, Michael admitted, but we need proof. Elena pointed to the computer. Can you tell who actually sent those emails? Michael started typing. I can try to trace the login details. It'll take some time. I'll check Jessie's cabin, Elena said. Maybe there's something there that can help us. Jessie's cabin was small and neat, just like the man himself. Elena had been there many times in recent weeks, for dinners he'd cooked, for quiet evenings, talking by the fire. Now she searched it for any clue to where he might have gone, or evidence of his innocence. In the bedside table drawer, she found a small wooden box. Inside was a faded photograph of a young couple, a man who looked strikingly like Jessie, and very pretty young woman. Written on the back, James and Catherine Summer, 1985, her mother and Jessie's father. The photograph was real. There was also a folded piece of paper, directions to a small town 3 hours away, and a note in Jessie's handwriting. Mom? Elena was about to leave when she heard a truck pull up outside. Through the window, she saw John Anderson climbing out. Fear shot through her. What was he doing here? She quickly hid in the bathroom, leaving the door cracked open enough to see into the main room. John entered without knocking, looking around furtively. He went straight to the wooden box Elena had just been looking through. Damn it. he muttered when he found it open. Where? Is it? He continued searching, growing more agitated. Elena's phone buzzed in her pocket. A text from Michael. Emails traced to external login, not Jesse, coming with Dad and security. That was all Elena needed. She stepped out of the bathroom. Looking for something, John? He spun around, shock, turning quickly to a forced smile. Elena, what are you doing here? I could ask you the same thing, she said coldly. This is Jesse's home. You have no right to be here. John's smile faltered. I heard he'd skipped town. Thought I'd see if he left anything behind explaining why. You mean like evidence that he was being framed? Elena asked. That someone else set up a bank account in his name, sent fake emails, tried to make it look like he and Evelyn Harmon. We're running a con? John's face hardened. I don't know what you're talking about. I think you do, Elena said. I think you've been planning this for months. You couldn't stand that I chose Jesse over you, that a drifter won where you lost. John laughed, but there was no humor in it. You have quite an imagination, Elena. The emails weren't sent from this computer, Elena said. Michael traced them to an external login, and I'm betting when the police look into it, they'll find your fingerprints all over this scheme. She saw the moment John realized the game was up. His eyes darted to the door behind her. No one will believe you, he said, his voice hardening. It's your word against mine. The Andersons against some cowboy no one even knows. Actually, came Charles Prescott's voice from the doorway. It's your word against a security camera that caught you accessing the stable office computer last week, and against bank records showing the money transfer came from an IP address registered to Anderson Holdings. John spun around to find Charles, Michael, and 2 security guards blocking the exit. Charles, John stammered. This is all a misunderstanding. Save it for the police, Charles cut him off. They're on their way. As security took John outside, Charles turned to Eleanor. I owe you an apology, and Jesse too. Eleanor felt tears of relief spring to her eyes. He's gone, Dad. He left with Evelyn. We'll find him, Charles promised. Bring him home where he belongs. The next morning, Eleanor and Charles drove to the small town indicated in Jesse's note. They found the address easily, a modest nursing home on a quiet street. At the reception desk, a kind-faced nurse directed them to a room at the end of the hall. Mrs. Harmon has a visitor, she said. First one in all the time she's been with us. Through the doorway, Eleanor saw Jessie sitting beside the bed of the woman she'd met in the garden. Evelyn looked even more frail in the hospital bed, but her eyes were bright as she talked with the son she hadn't seen in over 30 years. Eleanor held back, not wanting to intrude on their reunion, but Jessie sensed her presence and looked up. Their eyes met across the room. I'll give you a minute, Charles said quietly, stepping back. Elena walked into the room, her heart pounding. Jessie, he stood, uncertainty in his eyes. Eleanor, what are you doing here? Looking for you, she said simply. We know the truth. About John Anderson, the frame-up, all of it. You're cleared of everything. Relief washed over Jessie's face, followed quickly by caution. Why are you here, Elena? Really? She glanced at Evelyn, who gave her a small nod of encouragement. Because I made a mistake, Eleanor said. I doubted you when I should have trusted what I knew in my heart, that you're a good man, an honest man, the man I love. Jessie's eyes softened. You believe me now? I never stopped believing in you, Eleanor said. Not in my heart. I was just scared and confused. I'm so sorry. Jessie crossed the room in 2 strides and pulled her into his arms. I would have come back, he murmured against her hair. Once I knew for sure about my mother, about what really happened. I couldn't leave you for good. I know, Elena whispered. From the bed, Evelyn watched them with tired eyes. My James would be happy, she said softly, to see his son with Catherine's daughter, a circle closing. Eleanor and Jessie stayed with Evelyn for hours, learning the full story of James and Catherine's love, of the Prescott family's interference, of the land that should have been James's legacy to his son. When Charles joined them later, he brought the original deed. This land is rightfully yours, he told Jessie, handing it over. 50 acres that should never have been taken from your father. Jessie stared at the deed. I don't need land, sir. It's not about need, Charles said. It's about setting things. Right? He looked at Evelyn. Your husband was wronged by my family. I can't undo that, but I can make sure his son gets what should have been his. Evelyn's eyes filled with tears. Thank you, she whispered. 3 months later, Evelyn Harmon passed away peacefully with Jesse by her side. Eleanor stood with him at the funeral, her hand firmly in his as they said goodbye to the mother he'd only just found. On the small hill overlooking Prescott Hollow, Jesse built a simple house on the 50 acres that had been returned to him. From the front porch, you could see all the way to the main house, to the stables where he still worked each day, to the pastures where the horses ran free. It's a beautiful view, Eleanor said, joining him on the porch one evening as the sun set over the land they both loved. The most beautiful in the world, Jesse agreed, but he was looking at her, not the view. Eleanor smiled, leaning into his side. Dad asked me today when we're setting a date. Jesse raised an eyebrow. For what? For the wedding, you fool, Eleanor laughed, pushing him playfully. Jesse caught her hand, turning serious. Are you sure, Elena? You could have anyone, live anywhere. Are you sure you want this life with me? Elena looked around at the house he'd built with his own hands, at the land that connected their families across time, at the man who had taught her what real love felt like. I don't want easy, she said, echoing words from another time. I want you. Jesse's rare, beautiful smile broke across his face. He pulled her close and kissed her, there on the porch of the home they'd built together. Two people from different worlds who had found, against all odds, that the most precious legacy wasn't land or money, or even a family name. It was the love that grew between them, as enduring as the land itself.